Smoke from a lone street vendor's grill curled into the early morning sky, mingling with the dusty haze of city traffic. Horns blared, footsteps pounded the pavement, and somewhere in the din of urban chaos, a fragile life was about to change forever. Christopher Addison, a millionaire known for his ruthless business deals, was on the brink of despair over his daughter Emmeline's paralysis. In the same city streets roamed Jamal, a young black beggar boy, whose ragged clothes and haunting eyes told a story of hardships. No one could guess that their paths would intersect in a way that would defy all logic and transform them both. Christopher Addison's footsteps echoed across the polished marble floors of the Addison Tower lobby. At 53, with steel-grey hair combed back and sharp blue eyes that peered intently over half-rim glasses, Christopher had built his reputation as a powerful, relentless businessman. His multinational conglomerate, Addison Enterprises, stretched across real estate technology and manufacturing. Once the press had lauded him as the unstoppable visionary, but these days his determination seemed hollow, like a grand mansion with no light inside. The reason was his beloved daughter, Emmeline. At 10 years old, Emmeline had once been the soul of the Addison household, vibrant, warm, and fearless. She would race across the front lawn, singing show tunes in a playful soprano that could brighten anyone's day. But a tragic car accident 2 years prior had robbed her of the use of her legs. Now she quietly sat in her wheelchair, uncertain eyes peeking out behind thick black lashes, as though she were searching for a miracle in a world that had turned bleak and unfamiliar. Mabel Addison, Christopher's wife, was likewise weighed down by sorrow, yet she tried to infuse some comfort into the house. She supervised Emmeline's physical therapy sessions, organized volunteer activities for the staff who looked after her daughter, and kept a compassionate watch over her husband, even as his spirits disintegrated under the burden of guilt. It was Christopher, after all, who had been driving the car when they were hit by a reckless driver. Though no one blamed him, he carried the blame as if it were etched into his very bones. That morning, Christopher rushed out of his chauffeur-driven Bentley to check on some urgent business at Addison Tower. Stock prices had dipped after a manufacturing setback. The news outlets were abuzz with rumors of a rival corporation, Kingman and Rowe, wooing away Addison's top employees. Despite his personal turmoil, Christopher still commanded the ship, and the ship was in rough waters. Within minutes, he found himself behind his massive mahogany desk on the top floor, barking orders and trying to salvage deals that seemed to slip through his fingers. Yet behind every phone call and each signature on the dotted line, Christopher felt that relentless drumbeat of hopelessness in his heart. Would Emmeline ever smile freely again? Would she live a normal life? Lost in thought. He hardly noticed the day pass by, until Mabel called him on his private line, reminding him of Emmeline's doctor appointment that afternoon. With a sigh, he hung up the phone, left the tower, and headed for the hospital. Outside Addison Tower, the city hummed with life. Hawkers sold roasted corn, artisanal coffee, and second-hand clothes. Taxis jammed the road horns, bleating impatiently. It was at the corner of Louis Street and Parker Avenue that Christopher, glancing through the tinted window of his Bentley, first caught sight of Jamal. The boy's skinny frame, clad in tatters of mismatched clothes, stood out among the cluster of beggars. There was something peculiar about his posture, straight, dignified, unyielding to the cruelty around him. Christopher found himself staring for a moment before forcing his gaze away. The driver continued on, oblivious to Christopher's curiosity. Traffic parted, and they sped off toward the hospital. But something lingered in Christopher's mind, the memory of the boy's solemn eyes meeting his as if asking questions that Christopher himself couldn't answer. Emmeline sat by the window in her hospital room, her wheelchair angled just so she could see outside. Rows of windows in the neighbouring buildings blurred together, and the faint noise from the street below was more comforting than the sterile hum of medical equipment. She looked at her reflection in the glass, a girl with long brown hair and pale cheeks wearing a sky-blue hospital gown. Her once plump cheeks had thinned over the past 2 years, accentuating the curve of her jawline. But her dark eyes still had a spark somewhere. "Emmeline, sweetheart," Mabel said softly, pushing the door open. "Daddy's here." Christopher walked in. His shoulders drooped from exhaustion. Emmeline forced a small smile for her father. She didn't want him to feel any worse. She knew how he blamed himself. He reached out and squeezed her hand with gentle affection. Doctors bustled in and out. One of them was Dr. Sarah Coleman from Johns Hopkins Medical Center, a specialist who had been flown in to assess Emmeline's condition. After several tests, gentle taps on Emmeline's legs, and a series of hushed conversations, Dr. Coleman gave the same prognosis Christopher and Mabel had heard countless times. "We just need more time, more therapy. We're exploring new methods, but recovery remains uncertain." Despair crept into Christopher's face. Emmeline noticed and frowned, whispering, "Daddy, it's okay. I'm not giving up." Mabel placed a hand on Christopher's shoulder. "We have to keep the faith." The father nodded, mustering every ounce of calm he had left. After Dr. Coleman and her team left, Christopher pushed Emmeline's wheelchair toward the elevator. It was time to return home. On their way to the hospital's exit, they saw a flurry of movement on the street. Outside, a few beggar children ran up to cars, tapping on windows, pleading for coins. Christopher's gaze returned to the memory of that black boy he had seen earlier. He scanned the street, but didn't see him. Shaking off the feeling, he guided Mabel and Emmeline into the car and sighed deeply as they drove away. After dropping Emmeline at home for a rest, Christopher was back at Addison Tower by late afternoon. He had a slew of urgent meetings, but his concentration waned. The image of that beggar boy kept flickering in his mind. Why did the boy's stare unnerve him so much? He convinced himself it was guilt. Christopher had grown up with nothing. In his youth, he'd begged for scraps, done odd jobs, slept on benches. He'd vowed to leave that life behind forever. But seeing Jamal brought back memories he wanted buried. As dusk settled, Christopher left the office feeling unfulfilled. The day's problems remained only half resolved. On his way home, he asked the driver to stop a few blocks short of the Addison estate. "I'll walk," he told the driver, ignoring the man's surprised look. Sometimes Christopher found a strange solace in walking among the ordinary folk, unrecognized in the twilight. He strolled along the streetlights, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. That was when he noticed a small figure sitting on a tattered blanket near a closed bakery, softly humming a tune. It was Jamal. The boy had his hands outstretched, though few pedestrians roamed this wealthy part of town at night. His humming was a lullaby with a slow, rhythmic beat. Christopher froze in place, transfixed. Jamal looked up, startled. Upon recognizing Christopher, his eyes lit with something akin to hope. "Uncle," he called out. "Please help me. Spare some change." In that moment, Christopher was struck by the boy's courage in addressing him so familiarly. "Uncle." The word sent a warm jolt through his heart, reminiscent of simpler times before money and status had erected so many barriers. Christopher approached, taking out his wallet. "What's your name, son Jamal?" The boy responded, standing up slowly to show respect. Up close, Christopher saw that Jamal was about 12, maybe 13 at most. His skin glowed with youth despite the dirt, and his eyes radiated an uncanny kindness. "My name is Jamal R. Thompson." "Thompson?" Christopher asked, somewhat surprised at the surname. "Yes, sir," Jamal confirmed. "My grandpa used to work on a plantation before moving to the city. They gave him the name Thompson. That's how it's on my birth certificate." Christopher fished out a crisp bill of large denomination. Jamal's eyes widened. "Thank you, Uncle," he said earnestly. But then, as Christopher turned to leave, Jamal spoke again. "Uncle, can I talk to you for a moment? You look sad." Those words made Christopher pause. Under normal circumstances, he might have dismissed the boy. Instead, something in Jamal's voice compelled him. "Sad?" "Yes," Uncle Jamal said softly. "Like your heart is heavy." Christopher managed a bitter laugh. "Life is complicated, Jamal." Jamal nodded slowly, then said something that shook Christopher to his core. "Uncle, I can make your daughter walk again." Silence. The words echoed in Christopher's mind. How did the boy know he had a daughter? How did he know she couldn't walk? Christopher glared his business instincts, suspecting a con. "What do you mean, boy?" Unfazed by the sharp tone, Jamal stood taller. "I can see sorrow in your eyes, and I heard rumors from other kids on the street. They talk about you, the mighty Christopher Addison who built this big tower and has everything but can't help his own child. People say your daughter can't walk." Christopher felt anger welling inside him. "That's none of your business." Jamal didn't flinch. "I'm sorry, Uncle. Please don't be mad. I was just trying to say there's a way. I know a method. I can show you. I can heal her." Christopher stared at him, almost trembling with fury and desperation. Was this child mocking him? Or worse, was it some elaborate scheme? He had to fight the urge to yell. Instead, he coolly pulled out more bills, thrust them into Jamal's hand, and said, "Don't speak of my daughter again." He turned abruptly and walked off, heart hammering in his chest. He could feel Jamal's eyes on his back the entire way home. That night, Christopher barely slept. Meanwhile, Jamal huddled in his makeshift shelter under an old bridge with a few other street kids. Late into the night, he tossed and turned. He needed to help that wealthy man. The desperation in Christopher Addison's eyes was all too familiar, a silent plea that cut across social barriers. Jamal had lost his own mother to an illness when he was younger because they couldn't afford medical treatment. Since then, he'd discovered an odd ability, a talent for reading people's ailments and applying a form of healing he had learned from a mysterious older beggar named Isaiah. Isaiah was a traveling man, once a paramedic who lost everything in a tragic fire that killed his family. He wandered the streets helping beggars and the needy with leftover supplies he salvaged from clinics. Over time, he developed an alternative healing technique, a mix of physical therapy, gentle stretches, and an understanding of nerve functions. Jamal became Isaiah's eager student, learning how to massage muscles to relieve tension, how to gently stimulate nerve responses, and how to encourage blood flow to areas that doctors deemed irreparable. Isaiah often told Jamal, "What the mind believes the body tries to achieve. Sometimes all it takes is a different approach. Unconventional, yes, but it can work wonders." Jamal carried Isaiah's teachings like a sacred treasure. He'd witnessed an older beggar with a limp gradually learn to walk without a cane after Isaiah's sessions. Jamal wanted to become a healer of sorts, to help children like Emmeline see a new dawn. But how to convince Christopher Addison? At dawn, Jamal made up his mind. He would go to Addison Tower every day, if needed wait on that same corner, and hope for another chance to speak to the powerful man. If Christopher Addison needed proof, Jamal was determined to provide it. Days passed, and Christopher avoided that particular route, choosing instead to travel with tinted windows or leaving work at odd hours. Yet fate had other plans. One afternoon, following another disheartening medical update, this time from an expensive specialist in Switzerland, who offered nothing concrete, Christopher felt a sense of defeat creeping in. On a whim, he told the driver to take the usual route home. Maybe he was subconsciously hoping to encounter Jamal again, to glean some foolish hope. And there was Jamal, the moment the Bentley turned the corner. The boy ran up, not minding the looming security guard in the passenger seat. He tapped the tinted window. The driver tried to shoo him away, but Christopher raised a hand. He pressed a button, rolling down the glass just enough to hear the boy. Uncle Jamal said breathlessly, "Please give me a chance. Let me see your daughter. I promise I'm not lying. I can help." Christopher studied Jamal's face through the narrow opening. The boy's expression was earnest, unsullied by greed. His voice shook with sincerity. Without fully understanding why, Christopher found himself opening the car door and stepping out into the street. A curious crowd formed instantly. A millionaire in a tailored suit, stepping out to speak with a beggar boy, was a sight to behold. Christopher motioned the onlookers away with a curt nod to his security. Then, ignoring the chatter, he spoke quietly to Jamal. "All right, come with me. But if I find out you're scamming me..." Jamal shook his head vehemently. "I swear on my life, Uncle, I only want to help." Christopher gave another nod, and the driver helped Jamal into the front seat. The boy's face lit with nervous wonder as the plush interior surrounded him. He held his breath, half expecting to be kicked out. The car pulled away, heading toward the Addison family estate, a sprawling mansion perched on a hill with manicured lawns and a circular driveway lined with hedges. The Addison estate boasted tall iron gates, beyond which lay sculpted gardens, dotted with marble fountains, elegant hedgerows, and exotic flowers. Jamal had never seen such grandeur. His heart pounded as they drove past a fountain shaped like a swan. Could a place like this even exist in the same city where he slept on a cardboard mat under a bridge? Finally, the car stopped. Security guards in suits sprang forward, eyes narrowing at the sight of Jamal stepping out. Christopher raised a hand. "He's my guest." The staff exchanged puzzled glances, but said nothing. In the foyer, Mabel looked up from a conversation with the housekeeper, her face showing clear surprise at the visitor. "Chris," what she began. But Christopher silenced her with a look that said, "Trust me." He guided Jamal inside. The boy stood timid, yet resolute on the polished floor that gleamed under a chandelier. Emmeline was in the living room, propped up in her wheelchair by the bay windows, reading a book about horses. She looked up, saw Christopher and Jamal, and instantly grew curious. The boy approached slowly. "Hello," she said, her voice soft, uncertain. Jamal offered a tiny bow. "Hi. My name's Jamal." Mabel, after a moment's hesitation, introduced herself and Emmeline. "I'm Mabel Addison. This is our daughter Emmeline. May I ask what brings you here?" Christopher cleared his throat. He still couldn't believe he was doing this. Jamal says he knows a way to help Emmeline walk again. A silence fell, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Mabel gave her husband a concerned look. "Chris." "I know," Christopher said quietly. "It sounds absurd. But we've tried everything else. Let's hear him out." Emmeline's eyes flickered with a spark of hope and curiosity. She looked at Jamal, noticing how humble and earnest he appeared, how he kept his eyes steady despite being in such unfamiliar surroundings. "You really think you can help me?" she asked carefully, measured but hopeful. Jamal nodded. "I learned a technique that might help your legs. It's different from the hospital therapy, but it helps the nerves remember how to move. It might take time." Mabel glanced at Christopher, then at Emmeline, searching their faces. Finally, she took a breath. "What do you need, Jamal?" He swallowed nervously. "A private space, Matt's towels, warm water, and a promise that you'll trust me." They led Jamal to a small exercise room near the mansion's west wing, where Emmeline usually did her physical therapy. Walls lined with mirrors reflected various machines designed to strengthen her arms and upper body. Mabel had the staff bring extra towels, a bucket of warm water, and a comfortable mat. Emmeline was settled on a padded massage table, her delicate legs resting on a cushion. Christopher watched, arms folded, skepticism etched in his features. He had called Emmeline's private nurse and physiotherapist to observe. They stood in the corner exchanging dubious glances. Jamal didn't seem bothered by their presence. After carefully rinsing his hands in the warm water, he dried them on a towel and approached Emmeline. "Please tell me if anything hurts," he said to her gently. Emmeline nodded, her dark eyes full of cautious optimism. She felt Jamal's hands on her ankles, surprisingly warm and steady. He began a series of slow, deliberate movements, gentle presses and rotations, as though coaxing her muscles and nerves to wake. He whispered instructions. "Focus on where my hands are. Try to imagine your muscles responding. Breathe slowly." After a few minutes, Emmeline closed her eyes, breathing in a steady rhythm. The nurse watched with a raised eyebrow. The physiotherapist occasionally checked Emmeline's vitals. Christopher felt the tension in the air tighten like a coiled spring. Was this entire charade about to crash and burn? But then Emmeline let out a small gasp. I feel something," she said, voice quivering with wonder. A tingle. Christopher's posture jerked upright. A tingle. "We're in my calves," she managed. "It's faint, like pins and needles, but it's there." Mabel's eyes flooded with tears. The nurse hurried over with a stethoscope, checking Emmeline's pulse. She tested a reflex hammer on Emmeline's knee, not expecting much. Emmeline flinched lightly. A hush fell. Everyone stared at Emmeline's leg. The faintest movement, but still a movement. It wasn't a miracle leap, but it was more than the motionless limb they had grown used to seeing. Jamal exhaled in relief, though he maintained a composed demeanor. "We'll need to do this every day if you can. Little by little, maybe we can help your nerves remember." Christopher's eyes were wide, his mind swirling with 100 questions. "How? What is this technique?" Jamal shrugged, his expression earnest. "I learned from a man named Isaiah. He was once a paramedic. He taught me to find ways to stimulate blood flow and nerve connections. We focus on the mind, too. The mind can block signals if it's in constant fear or pain." The nurse murmured to the physiotherapist. "We do some similar exercises, but not quite like this. This boy's approach is so intuitive." For the first time in a long while, Christopher felt hope stirring in his chest. Hope that maybe, just maybe, Emmeline could walk. He turned to Jamal, swallowing hard. "We'll do whatever it takes." That evening, Mabel insisted Jamal stay in one of the mansion's guest rooms. The staff frowned at housing a street beggar, but Christopher overruled them. He remembered what it was like to sleep outside in the cold. He also wanted Jamal close by, so Emmeline could receive treatment daily. The guest room was more luxurious than anything Jamal had ever known. A soft bed, plush carpet, an ensuite bathroom with hot water. He hesitated by the doorway, unsure if he was allowed to set foot on the immaculate carpet with his dusty shoes. Mabel, noticing his hesitation, guided him gently. "It's okay. This is your room now. Make yourself comfortable." That night, Christopher and Mabel discussed their new house guest. Their excitement about Emmeline's possible improvement was tempered by skepticism. Could Jamal really succeed where countless top doctors had failed? "If it's false hope, it'll break Emmeline's heart," Mabel said, tears threatening to spill. Christopher took her hands in his. "I know. But you saw her reaction today. She felt something. That's more than she's felt in 2 years." Mabel nodded. "I still can't understand how a street kid learned such a skill." Christopher sighed. "Tomorrow, I'll get more information. For now, let's rest." Their discussion turned to dinner preparations, Emmeline's next therapy appointments, and Christopher's business troubles. For once, Christopher felt his corporate worries take a back seat. All that mattered was Emmeline. The next morning, Jamal woke at dawn, unsettled by the silence. He was used to the roar of passing cars or rowdy fellow beggars, the plush bed, the clean pajamas one of the staff had found for him. It all felt surreal. Remembering his mission, he quickly washed up and made his way to Emmeline's room. He found her awake, sitting in her wheelchair, brushing her hair. She turned eyes lighting up at the sight of him. "Morning, Jamal." "Morning," he said with a shy grin. Ready for today's session, Emmeline nodded enthusiastically. Together they went to the exercise room, where Mabel awaited them with quiet expectation. The physiotherapist was also there, armed with a notepad to document any progress. Jamal began his routine, gentle touches, rotations, guided breathing. Emmeline closed her eyes, focusing on each sensation. She let out soft gasps every few minutes, describing warmth or tingling in her limbs. The physiotherapist scribbled notes furiously, occasionally performing reflex tests. The results were modest, yet undeniably real. Emmeline was regaining some sensation, a flicker of nerve response that indicated a path to possible recovery. The sessions continued each day. Emmeline's spirits soared. She smiled, more often insisted on wearing her favorite floral dresses, and asked the staff to open the windows so she could smell the fresh air. Christopher's eyes shone with gratitude whenever he saw Jamal. However, not everyone in the Addison circle was pleased. Personal nurse Harriet began to suspect that Jamal was either incredibly lucky or a fraud. She approached Christopher one afternoon. "Sir, I advise caution. We don't know this boy's background. He might be exploiting your generosity." Christopher's face darkened. "I've seen Emmeline's improvement with my own eyes. We've given doctors millions. Who are we to doubt him if it's working?" Harriet pursed her lips. "Yes, but for how long, sir? And at what cost?" Christopher dismissed her concerns, but a seed of doubt was planted. He resolved to investigate Jamal's past, wanting to ensure that Emmeline wasn't being led on by false promises. Christopher used his connections to track down any record of Jamal R. Thompson. He discovered that Jamal had lived in an orphanage called St. Bridget's until it was shut down due to lack of funding. There were no formal schooling records. The only mention was from a local charity group that occasionally fed homeless children near the river. No one claimed to know about his special healing abilities, only that he was a bright kid who looked out for younger street children. The real breakthrough came when Christopher found Isaiah in a local run-down clinic. Isaiah confirmed that he had trained Jamal in alternative physical therapy methods, gleaned from his paramedic background and additional research in free libraries. "He's a natural," Isaiah said. "He has an intuitive touch and genuine compassion. That's a powerful combination for healing." When Christopher returned home to see Jamal and Emmeline mid-session, he felt an inexplicable wave of relief. If Isaiah wasn't lying, then maybe Jamal was indeed the miracle they had needed. But trouble loomed on another front. At Addison Enterprises, Christopher faced a hostile takeover attempt by rival Kingman and Rowe. The media swarmed with headlines about Addison's weakening leadership, about CEOs who took personal crises too far and neglected their corporate duties. The board of directors scheduled an emergency meeting to discuss strategy, hinting that if Christopher couldn't stabilize the company, they might vote him out. In the face of these professional storms, Christopher found solace in Emmeline's budding progress. She could wiggle her toes on command now, an achievement that nearly brought him to tears. No matter what happened in the boardroom, he had to see this through. A week later, tension rose to a boil. Harriet insisted on using advanced medical tests to confirm the progress. "We need an MRI scan," she argued. "If there's real nerve regeneration, it'll show." Worried that Harriet might upset Jamal or sow doubt in Emmeline's mind, Christopher reluctantly agreed to let the Addison family physician set up the scan. Emmeline showed signs of real excitement. She wanted proof that her body was healing. They visited the hospital. Doctors took imaging of Emmeline's spine and lower limbs. The results were inconclusive. There seemed to be minor improvements, but not enough to declare a miracle cure. Some specialists dismissed Jamal's methods as marginally effective therapy, while others admitted they couldn't fully explain the nerve activity. Harriet latched on to the inconclusive nature of the scans. "See, it's not guaranteed," she told Christopher. She may have had these slight improvements without him. Struggling with corporate pressures and worried about Emmeline's hopes being dashed, Christopher cornered Jamal in the hallway later that day. "I need to know if you're certain this will work," he demanded, voice trembling with urgency. "I can't have my daughter's heart broken again." Jamal swallowed hard. I can't promise everything, Uncle. But what I do with all my heart. I believe in it." Anger mingled with desperation in Christopher's eyes. He saw in Jamal a child forced to grow up too soon. But he also felt the horrifying weight of possibly disappointing Emmeline if Jamal's technique proved futile. "Just do your best," Christopher whispered, turning away before Jamal could see the tears welling up. As Emmeline's therapy sessions continued, so did her progress. She could now flex her ankles slightly, and sensation up to her knees was improving. Joy radiated from her, like a beacon warming the entire household. Christopher and Mabel felt a renewed sense of optimism they hadn't known in years. But that sense of hope also stirred an unexpected tension in the staff. Some employees resented Jamal's sudden status. He was no longer a street urchin to be pitied or ignored. He had the trust of the household. He came and went, freely dined at the family table sometimes, and received new clothes from Mabel, who insisted he dress properly. A quiet jealousy festered among a few staff members who had served the Addisons for years and never received such personal attentions. Rumors circulated. Some claimed Jamal was a witch doctor. Others believed he was conning the family for wealth. Harriet, though professional, also looked at the boy with suspicion. She'd catch Jamal humming unfamiliar tunes or rearranging Emmeline's therapy mats in odd shapes, claiming it helped center the energy. It all seemed too bizarre. One evening, Harriet told the butler Mark, "My words, something about this boy doesn't add up. Just wait. The truth will come out." While these tensions simmered at home, Christopher's corporate battle escalated. Kingman and Rowe launched a public relations assault, criticizing Addison Enterprises for failing to deliver new products on time. Key board members wavered in their allegiance to Christopher, worried that his personal woes had made him soft. Rumors spread that a board vote might dethrone him as CEO. In a desperate bid, Christopher scheduled a high-stakes meeting at the Addison estate. He wanted to showcase his visionary plans in a comfortable environment, believing that hosting the board in his personal domain might remind them of his passion and leadership. On the day of the meeting, the estate was abuzz with activity. Caterers prepared elaborate meals, staff polished every surface, and Christopher rehearsed his presentation. Mabel wore a simple yet elegant dress, greeting each board member with practiced grace. Midway through the meeting, Emmeline appeared in her wheelchair, escorted by Jamal. Christopher paused his corporate speech, fear twisting in his gut. Would the sight of Emmeline's condition remind the board of his vulnerabilities? But Emmeline looked radiant. She politely greeted the board members, her smile infectious. One board member, a crusty old businessman named Gordon Reed, frowned at Jamal standing behind Emmeline's wheelchair. "Who's this?" he asked in a curt tone. Emmeline answered before Christopher could. "This is Jamal Thompson. He's helping me learn to walk again." A few board members looked amused or incredulous, but Christopher caught a flicker of sympathy in some eyes. He resumed his presentation, focusing on new product lines, expansion strategies, and cost-cutting measures. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing them. The corporate world had little patience for personal redemption stories. During a break, Jamal overheard two board members talking about Christopher's potential ouster. Their words were dismissive calling. Christopher distracted and obsessed with his daughter's condition. Heart-pounding, Jamal approached Christopher, pulling him aside. "Uncle," he whispered, "they're planning to remove you as CEO." Christopher's face darkened. "I suspected as much. Maybe it's for the best. I can focus on Emmeline." Jamal shook his head fiercely. "No, you worked your whole life for this, uncle. You can't let them take it away. You have to fight. For yourself. For Emmeline." Christopher sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "It's complicated, Jamal. The board only sees numbers. They don't see me as a father fighting for his daughter's life." Jamal clenched his fists. "Then show them why you fight. Show them you're not weak, that your love for Emmeline makes you stronger." Moments later, Christopher took the stage again, exuding a renewed determination. He spoke passionately about Addison Enterprises as a family legacy, about how personal challenges had given him deeper insight and empathy that could guide the company to ethical and profitable frontiers. Some board members softened, others remained skeptical. In the end, they postponed their vote, granting Christopher a 2-week reprieve to prove himself. That night, after the board members left, Emmeline asked for a private talk with her parents and Jamal. She folded her hands in her lap, trembling slightly. "Mum, Dad, Jamal, I have something important to say." Christopher and Mabel perched on a sofa, while Jamal stood near the window. Emmeline's voice quivered. "I had a dream. I saw myself running through a meadow, And Jamal was there guiding me. Mabel took Emmeline's hand. A dream, Emmeline nodded. Yes, but it felt so real. I was running without my wheelchair, feeling the grass under my feet. I think it's a sign. Christopher exhaled sorrow in his eyes. Emmy, honey, I don't want you to get your hopes too high. I'm not giving up, Daddy, she said, a steely resolve in her voice. Then she looked at Jamal. But Jamal, I need to know. Can you really help me walk? Will I ever be on my feet again? Jamal's throat tightened. He approached Emmeline, kneeling so that their eyes were level. I believe so, Emmeline. I believe with enough time and dedication, we can get you there. Emmeline blinked back, tears reaching out to squeeze Jamal's hand. A quiet hush enveloped them, a moment of shared vulnerability and courage. Christopher and Mabel exchanged a glance. They were amazed at how much trust Emmeline had placed in this boy, who'd shown up from nowhere. As Emmeline's progress grew more visible, now she could lift each leg a few inches off the wheelchair footrest. The staff's simmering jealousy found a catalyst, Harriet. Convinced that Jamal was too good to be true, she rummaged through his belongings when he was busy with Emmeline, searching for evidence of wrongdoing. One evening, Harriet claimed she found petty cash missing from the safe in the butler's pantry. She pointed an accusatory finger at Jamal, stating that he was the only outsider with access to the house. The staff whispered among themselves. Jamal denied the theft tears in his eyes. Christopher questioned him pointedly. "Did you take the money?" Jamal shook his head adamantly. "I would never. Uncle, you've given me a home, food, clothes. I'd never steal from you." Mabel stood by Jamal. "He's done nothing but help Emmeline. Why would he risk everything?" Harriet refused to let the matter drop. Tensions escalated. Christopher, torn between loyalty to Jamal and loyalty to longtime staff, decided to check the estate's security cameras. Sure enough, the footage revealed Harriet herself taking the money. She had planted it in Jamal's room to frame him. Exposed. Harriet confessed she feared losing her position if Jamal fully healed Emmeline. "I've worked here for 10 years, she sobbed. "I was afraid you'd cast me aside." Christopher's fury was palpable, but also laced with sadness. He dismissed Harriet on the spot, ensuring she left the estate immediately. Jamal was exonerated, but the damage lingered. Jamal felt a sting of betrayal. He realized not everyone in this grand house saw him as an ally. With the Harriet scandal resolved, Christopher refocused on both Emmeline's progress and the looming corporate showdown. The 2-week deadline for the board's decision approached. Christopher worked late nights meticulously crafting presentations and reaching out to potential partners. Mabel gently reminded him that Emmeline's sessions needed continuity, so Christopher tried to juggle both worlds, balancing fatherhood and corporate leadership. Emmeline improved further. She could now stand for a few seconds with support. Her joy was a beacon of light in the mansion, energizing everyone, especially Christopher. On the eve of the board meeting, he found Emmeline practicing standing exercises with Jamal. Tears of pride welled in his eyes as he watched her knees wobble, but remain locked for a precious few seconds. "Dad." Emmeline called out excitedly, glimpsing him at the door. "Look at me." She clutched Jamal's hands, trembling with the effort, but she was upright. Christopher walked over, gently supporting her arms. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart." He looked at Jamal, voice thick with gratitude. "I can never repay you." Jamal smiled. "Seeing her stand is enough." The board convened at Addison Tower, a grand conference room overlooking the city skyline. Christopher stood at the head of the table wearing a confident expression. Yet underneath, he was a bundle of nerves. He began his presentation, a bold vision that merged cutting-edge technology with philanthropic endeavors, reflecting the empathy he'd gained from caring for Emmeline. Some board members were intrigued, while others remained detached. Just as the meeting looked poised to conclude, the door swung open. Emmeline, supported by Mabel and Jamal, entered. A murmur rippled through the room. No one expected to see Christopher's wheelchair-bound daughter here, much less attempt to stand before them. Christopher's heart pounded. He hadn't planned this. Emmeline, with shaky determination, reached for the back of an empty chair. She held on, pressing her weight against her legs. Wobbling, she took a single step forward, guided by Jamal's steady hands. A hushed gasp swept the boardroom. For those who knew Emmeline's story, it was a remarkable sight. Christopher rushed to Emmeline's side, tears shimmering. "Emmy," he whispered, "you didn't have to do this." She smiled, eyes gleaming with courage. "I wanted them to see that anything is possible when you believe and keep trying, just like you taught me, Dad." The room went silent for a long, poignant moment. Then Gordon Reed, the crusty old board member, stood up and began clapping. Others followed suit. Emmeline sank back into her wheelchair, exhausted but beaming. That spontaneous demonstration of resilience shifted the atmosphere. In the final vote, Christopher retained his position as CEO, albeit with strict conditions to stabilize company finances in the coming months. Buoyed by his victory, Christopher returned home late that night to celebrate with Mabel, Emmeline, and Jamal. They held a small dinner in the family dining room, complete with sparkling juice for Emmeline and Jamal. The conversation flowed with ease and laughter, something that had been missing from the Addison household for a long time. But as they retired for the night, Christopher received an urgent phone call. Isaiah, Jamal's mentor, had been hospitalized. The older man had collapsed in the street, undone by an untreated condition. Jamal turned pale, trembling. Christopher quickly arranged for the Addison family's private doctor to see Isaiah. They rushed to the hospital together. Isaiah was in a critical state, lacking the resources for proper care. Without hesitation, Christopher agreed to cover the medical costs. Jamal stood by Isaiah's bedside, tears streaming down his face. "You saved me so many times. Now let me help save you," he murmured. Isaiah weakly squeezed Jamal's hand. "Don't cry for me, boy. You're carrying on what I taught you. That is enough." Over the following week, Isaiah's condition stabilized. He'd need a delicate surgery and long-term care. Christopher arranged everything, ensuring that Isaiah could have a comfortable recovery. Grateful and emotional, Jamal confided in Christopher. "You're a good man, Uncle. No matter what people say about big CEOs and money, you have a real heart." Christopher smiled, placing a hand on Jamal's shoulder. "It's because I see something of myself in you. We both know what it's like to have nothing." At the Addison mansion, life started settling into a new normal. Emmeline continued her therapy, becoming stronger each day. She could now take several steps with a walker, her smile reflecting newfound independence. Mabel often found herself in tears of joy, witnessing the transformation of her once despairing daughter into a hopeful young girl. Rumors spread in the city about the miraculous healing. Some credited Addison's wealth, others whispered about Jamal's mystical powers. Journalists requested interviews. Tabloids spun dramatic stories. Christopher shielded Emmeline from the media frenzy, but recognized that Jamal's gift could help many. He contemplated the possibility of formal training or a specialized clinic to harness Jamal's abilities under medical supervision. One stormy night, a severe thunderstorm hammered the city. Lightning illuminated the Addison estate. Thunder rattled the windows and rain pelted the rooftops. Emmeline woke up, screaming her legs in tremendous pain, burning, tingling spasms that left her writhing. Jamal raced into the room, followed by Christopher and Mabel. Emmeline clutched her thighs, tears streaming down her cheeks. Christopher's voice trembled with fear. "What's happening?" Jamal felt Emmeline's muscles. "It's the nerves," he said in a strained voice. "They might be firing again too quickly. Her body isn't used to it. We need to ease the spasms." While Mabel fetched warm towels, Jamal massaged Emmeline's legs with the technique Isaiah had taught him. The storm raged outside, but in the room a solemn hush descended as they waited to see if Emmeline's pain would subside. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the spasms eased. Emmeline's breathing steadied, though she was drenched in sweat, face pale. She murmured thanks to Jamal and her parents, drifting off into an exhausted sleep. Christopher wrapped an arm around Jamal's shoulders. "You saved her from excruciating pain." "Thank you." Jamal's eyes were heavy with sorrow. "She's healing, but it won't be easy. Healing nerves can sometimes cause more pain than numbness. But it's a necessary step, Uncle." Christopher nodded, tears glistening. "Do whatever it takes. We'll get through this together." Days turned into weeks. Emmeline endured the occasional flare-up of nerve pain, but overall her progress soared. She advanced from the walker to crutches, then from crutches to brief unassisted steps. Each milestone was celebrated like a holiday in the Addison household. Mabel, once quietly despondent, blossomed with maternal pride. She set up a small garden for Emmeline, believing nurturing life could help Emmeline's mind focus on healing. Emmeline planted sunflower seeds, marveling at their slow growth, a mirror to her own journey. Jamal helped water them, referencing old lessons from Isaiah about how growth happens in stages, each requiring patience and care. Christopher juggled corporate tasks while actively participating in Emmeline's therapy. Board morale improved as Addison Enterprises stabilized under Christopher's re-energized leadership. The public perception shifted from seeing him as a broken man to a resilient leader who overcame adversity. Jamal, now an accepted member of the household, occasionally ventured back to the streets to help other beggars. He distributed leftover food, offered them advice, and told them, "There's always hope, no matter how grim it seems." His transformation from homeless beggar to in-house healer was something straight out of a fairy tale. Yet it was real tangible. One morning a letter arrived for Jamal. It bore a return address he didn't recognize. Opening it cautiously, he found a handwritten note from a man claiming to be his estranged father, Brian Thompson. The letter read, "I heard you're living in Addison's mansion now. I regret leaving you at St. Bridget's. If you can forgive me, I'd like to meet." Jamal's hands shook. He had been told his father died years ago, but apparently that was a lie. Anger and confusion warred within him. Did he want to see the man who had abandoned him? Could he forgive that betrayal? When Jamal confided in Christopher, the older man advised caution. "We don't know if this man has good intentions, but if you need closure, I'll support you." Eventually, Jamal decided to meet Brian Thompson in a public cafe. Emmeline, determined to show support, insisted on coming, now able to walk short distances without assistance. Christopher, Mabel, and Jamal arrived first. Brian Thompson showed up in tattered clothes, smelling of cheap alcohol. He had the same deep-set eyes as Jamal, but his gaze was hollow. Brian sputtered excuses, blaming poverty and personal addictions for abandoning Jamal. He'd heard rumors of Jamal's success with the Addisons and wanted to re-enter his life, but the sincerity of his regrets was questionable. Jamal stared at the father he barely knew, tears stinging his eyes. "I begged on the streets for years," he whispered. "Where were you then?" Brian had no real answer. Christopher kept a calm but protective posture, ready to shield Jamal from further pain. Eventually, Brian asked for money, claiming it was for a fresh start. Jamal stood up, heart pounding. He recalled the boy he once was starving for a father's love. Now he saw only a man with empty promises. "I'm sorry," Jamal said, pushing a small sum of money toward Brian. "This is all I can give you. But I can't be what you abandoned. If you really want to change, prove it. I won't close the door forever." It was a heart-wrenching conclusion to a meeting that could have brought healing. Instead, it offered a stark reminder of the cruel realities life sometimes imposes. Jamal returned to the Addison estate with a heavy heart, yet strangely relieved that he finally had some closure. Weeks later, Emmeline took her first independent steps across the living room floor. No walker, no crutches, no helping hand. She wobbled arms, stretched out for balance, but she did it. Christopher and Mabel watched tears streaming down their faces, while Jamal stood behind her, hands clasped in front of him, ready to intervene if she stumbled. Emmeline managed 6 steps before collapsing into Christopher's waiting arms, giggling with unbridled joy. "I did it!" she squealed. Mabel pulled Jamal into a tight hug. "I can never thank you enough." Christopher, overcome by emotion, clasped Jamal's hands. "You gave me back my daughter's smile. You gave her the ability to walk again. How can I repay you, son?" Jamal shook his head, tears glimmering. "Just keep your promise, Uncle. Take care of her, and let me keep helping others too." Time flowed onward. Emmeline continued to strengthen her legs through regular exercises and checkups. She resumed some of her old hobbies, dancing, painting, running around the garden with her beloved dog. When the city held its annual charity marathon, Emmeline participated in a children's 1-mile walk-run segment, finishing with a triumphant smile. Christopher, inspired by Jamal's talent, funded a small therapy clinic in one of the underprivileged neighborhoods. Jamal and Isaiah, now fully recovered, volunteered there, offering unconventional but effective therapy to individuals who couldn't afford high hospital bills. Word spread, and soon the clinic became a beacon of hope for the community. The Addison estate thrived with renewed spirit. Staff morale improved. Mabel organized philanthropic events, raising money for medical research and community outreach programs. Journalists occasionally tried to sensationalize the miracle story, but Christopher carefully guarded Jamal's privacy. The boy still had a life of his own, one of service and quiet determination. One late afternoon, Christopher found Jamal sitting by the estate's garden pond, feeding ducks. The sun cast an orange glow across the water. The older man sat beside him, a peaceful silence between them. Uncle Jamal began softly. "I've been thinking. Emmeline's better now. Maybe I should move on. Help more people." Christopher's throat tightened. "I'd be lying if I said I want you to leave. You're part of our family now. But I understand. This is your calling." Jamal turned, a tear rolling down his cheek. "You changed my life, Uncle. You gave me a chance when no one else would." Christopher pulled the boy into a hug. "No, Jamal. You changed ours, and for that I'll be eternally grateful." The next day, the Addisons gathered for a bittersweet farewell to Jamal. Isaiah waited in the driveway with an old truck packed with supplies for their new clinic expansion. Emmeline clung to Jamal, tears brimming. "Will you come back to visit?" "Of course," Jamal said, voice shaky. "You're my little sister now." Mabel kissed Jamal's forehead. "Thank you for healing our daughter's body and soul." Christopher handed Jamal a set of documents. "A small trust fund in your name. Use it for the clinic or for yourself. But I want you to have security, a home, if you ever need it." Jamal nodded, overcome with gratitude. He climbed into the truck, waving at the family that had become his own. As the truck rumbled down the long driveway, Emmeline wiped her eyes, whispering, "Thank you, Jamal." In the weeks and months to follow, Emmeline's recovery became complete. She walked, ran, and even danced. Each milestone was a testament to the power of hope, determination, and the unwavering love of family, biological or otherwise. Christopher, a man once trapped by guilt, found renewed faith in human connection. His company prospered under a new model of compassionate leadership, and Mabel's philanthropic pursuits blossomed. Through it all, the memory of a ragged, dark-eyed boy who whispered, "Uncle, I can make your daughter walk again," echoed in their hearts as a reminder that miracles can come from the unlikeliest places. As the Addison family gathered one final time to watch Emmeline dancing under the warm sunshine, they knew their journey was far from ordinary. A broken-hearted millionaire, his paralyzed daughter, and a black beggar boy with healing hands, fate brought them together to create a miracle that went beyond medicine. Emmeline's triumphant steps were more than a personal victory. They symbolized hope for anyone who dares to believe in the impossible. Thank you for joining us on this emotional roller coaster of redemption, faith, and resilience. If you found inspiration or hope in this story, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share it with friends or family who might need a reminder that hope is alive in the world. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories that celebrate the triumph of the human spirit. Your engagement keeps these uplifting tales alive.